A captured woman hiding in the shadows of a Lakota camp dares to nurse her starving infant, knowing discovery could mean death for them both. But when Chief Chanupa Hota finds her in this vulnerable moment, his reaction becomes a story that no one in the tribe could have predicted. The relentless Dakota wind howled across the open plains as Mary Calhoun pressed herself against the rough buffalo hide wall of the teepee, her arms wrapped protectively around the small bundle against her chest. 5-month-old Emma whimpered softly, her tiny face contorted with hunger, and Mary knew she couldn't wait any longer. The sun had climbed past its zenith, casting sharp shadows across the Lakota encampment that sprawled along the banks of the Powder River. It had been 4 weeks since the raid, 4 weeks since she'd watched her husband Daniel cut down while defending their small ranch house in the Wyoming foothills. 4 weeks since Lakota warriors had swept through their homestead like a prairie fire, taking everything, including her and Emma. Mary's hands trembled as she loosened the torn calico fabric of her dress. The garment, once a cheerful yellow patterned with small blue flowers, was now stained with dirt, sweat, and the unmistakable marks of her brutal journey across the wilderness. Her blonde hair, which Daniel had loved to see catching the afternoon light, now hung in matted tangles around her gaunt face. The women of the camp had given her barely enough food to survive, just scraps of dried meat and water, as if she were some animal they were keeping alive for an uncertain purpose. She had learned quickly to keep her eyes down, to move quietly, to make herself as invisible as possible among people whose language she couldn't understand, and whose customs remained a frightening mystery. Emma's whimpers grew more insistent, and Mary glanced nervously toward the teepee entrance. The camp was alive with activity. She could hear the sounds of women working, the rhythmic scraping of hides being processed, the cheerful shouts of children playing near the river, the occasional whinny of horses from the large herd kept at the camp's edge. These sounds had become the backdrop of her captivity, a constant reminder that she was trapped in a world completely foreign to everything she had known. Her former life, the small ranch she and Daniel had built with their own hands, the vegetable garden she had tended so carefully, the rocking chair on the porch where she had nursed Emma in peaceful twilight hours. All of it felt like a dream from someone else's life. The journey from her homestead to this camp had been a nightmare of exhaustion and terror. The warriors had bound her hands and forced her to walk for miles each day, stopping only when darkness made travel impossible. Emma had cried incessantly those first few days, her infant distress adding to Mary's agony. Several times Mary had stumbled and fallen, only to be roughly pulled back to her feet. One warrior, a young man with a cruel smile and a jagged scar across his cheek, had seemed to take particular pleasure in her suffering. He would ride close and make threatening gestures, laughing when she flinched away. The other warriors had largely ignored her, treating her as nothing more than cargo to be delivered to their camp. When they had finally arrived at the Lakota settlement, Mary had been thrown into this small teepee on the camp's outskirts, away from the main lodges where the families lived. For days, she had seen almost no one except an elderly woman who brought meager rations once daily. The old woman never spoke, never made eye contact, simply left the food and water and departed as quickly as she had come. Mary had spent those early days in a fog of grief and shock, holding Emma close and trying to understand how her world had shattered so completely in a single morning. With no other choice, Mary positioned Emma to nurse, hunching her shoulders forward to shield them both as much as possible. The baby latched on immediately, her desperate suckling finally quieting to the soft sounds of contentment. For just a moment, Mary allowed herself to close her eyes and imagine they were somewhere safe, somewhere far from this place of uncertainty and fear. She thought of Daniel's last words to her as the raiders had broken through their door. He had shouted for her to run, to take Emma and hide in the root cellar. But there had been no time. A warrior had grabbed her before she'd made it 3 steps. And the last image she had of her husband was him falling, a Lakota lance piercing through his chest. The memory sent a fresh wave of grief through her body. Daniel had been a good man, patient and kind, with dreams of building something lasting on the frontier. He had come west from Pennsylvania 5 years ago, seeking opportunity and freedom from the crowded eastern cities. They had met in Cheyenne, where Mary had been working as a seamstress in a dry goods store. Their courtship had been brief but genuine, and when Daniel had proposed with a simple gold band and promises of a future together, Mary had accepted without hesitation. The first years of their marriage had been hard but happy. They had built their small ranch house log by log, cleared land for crops, raised chickens and a few cattle. When Emma was born the previous winter, their joy had seemed complete. They had talked about expanding the ranch, maybe hiring help, building a proper barn. Those dreams now lay as dead as Daniel himself. The shadow fell across her suddenly, blocking out the strips of sunlight that had been filtering through the teepee's smoke hole. Mary's eyes snapped open, her heart lurching into her throat. Standing at the entrance was a figure she had only seen from a distance, a man whose very presence commanded attention throughout the camp. Chief Chanupahota stood silhouetted against the bright afternoon sky, his tall frame filling the teepee opening. He was perhaps in his mid-40s, his face carved with the strong features of his people and marked by thin scars that spoke of battles fought and survived. His long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers, and he wore a shirt decorated with intricate beadwork and quillwork that marked his status. Round his neck hung a pipe bag, the sacred chanupa that gave him his name. Mary's breath caught in her chest. She instinctively curled around Emma, certain that this moment would bring some new horror. She had heard stories, terrible stories whispered among frontier women about what happened to captives, about violence and cruelty and fates worse than death. Her mind raced with terrified possibilities. Would he strike her for daring to feed her child? Would he tear Emma from her arms? Would this be the moment when whatever thin thread of mercy had kept them alive finally snapped? Her muscles tensed, preparing for pain, for loss, for whatever punishment her captors had been saving for her. During her weeks of captivity, Mary had observed the chief from afar, piecing together an understanding of his role in the tribe. She had seen how he settled disputes between families with calm authority, how he directed hunting parties with strategic precision, how even the fiercest warriors sought his counsel before making important decisions. The camp moved according to his word. When he spoke, people listened. When he commanded, they obeyed. She had watched him once from across the camp as he taught a group of young boys how to string their bows, his patience evident even from a distance. Another time, she had seen him comfort a woman whose husband had been killed in a skirmish with cavalry soldiers. His hand on her shoulder, his voice low and steady. Chief Chanupahota stood completely still, his dark eyes fixed on the nursing child. His expression was unreadable, that same stern mask Mary had seen him wear as he moved through the camp, settling disputes, directing hunts, making the countless decisions that governed his people's lives. She had watched him from afar during her captivity, noting how warriors deferred to him, how women sought his counsel, how even the wildest children quieted when he spoke. The people called him by another name too, one she had heard repeated often enough to understand its significance, Grey Smoke, a name earned in his youth for his ability to move through enemy territory as silently and invisibly as smoke on the wind. The silence stretched between them, broken only by Emma's soft sounds of feeding and the distant noises of the camp beyond. Mary's heart hammered so hard she was certain he could hear it. She wanted to speak, to beg for mercy, but the words stuck in her throat. What could she possibly say? She didn't speak Lakota, and the few warriors who had broken English had made it clear through gestures and tone that her words meant nothing here. She was property, a captive, something less than human in the eyes of most who looked at her. Her blue eyes, so unusual among the tribe, had drawn curious stares and sometimes hostile glares from the women who saw her as an intruder, a reminder of the settlers who kept pushing into Lakota lands. Then something extraordinary happened. Chief Chanupahota's stern expression softened almost imperceptibly. Something flickered in his eyes, a flash of emotion that transformed his face for just a heartbeat. It wasn't anger or disgust. It was something else entirely, something that looked almost like pain or perhaps recognition. He spoke, his voice deep and measured, words in Lakota that Mary couldn't understand, but whose tone carried an unexpected gentleness. Without another word, the chief turned and called out to someone beyond the teepee. A young woman appeared moments later, perhaps 17 or 18 years old, with intelligent eyes and a curious expression. She carried a water skin and a small bundle wrapped in deerskin. The chief spoke to her in their language, gesturing toward Mary and Emma. The young woman nodded, her eyes widening slightly with what looked like surprise, then quickly approached. Mary shrank back instinctively, but the young woman's movements were slow and non-threatening. She set the water skin down within Mary's reach, then carefully unwrapped the deerskin bundle to reveal dried buffalo meat, some kind of pemmican and what looked like dried berries mixed with fat and crushed nuts. The portions were generous, more food than Mary had seen in days. The young woman gestured to the items, then to Mary and Emma, making it clear these provisions were for them. Her movements were deliberate and kind, taking care not to startle the frightened captive. Chief Chanupahota spoke again, and this time the young woman turned to Mary and attempted to communicate in halting, broken English. The words came slowly, awkwardly, as if she were pulling them from deep memory. Chief says child needs strong, mother needs strong. You eat. She pointed to the food again, then added with a shy smile, I am Zitkala. I help you. My grandmother taught me white man's words when traders came to our winter camp many seasons ago. Mary stared at them both in disbelief, unable to process what was happening. This was the opposite of everything she had expected, everything she had been taught to fear. Chief Chanupahota stood there watching her with an expression she still couldn't fully read, but the hostility she had braced for was notably absent. Instead, there was something in his gaze that reminded her of the way Daniel used to look at Emma, a softness reserved for something precious and vulnerable. The chief spoke again, longer this time, his words directed at Zitkala, who listened intently and nodded several times. When he finished, she turned back to Mary and struggled to translate, searching for the right English words. Chief says he understand. He had daughter once. Beautiful daughter, hair black like raven wing, smile like sunrise. Sickness took them, many winters past. White man's sickness that came up river with traders. The spotted death. She touched her own chest, then pointed to Chief Chanupahota. He knows heart pain of father, of mother who watches child suffer. He sees you protect child like bear protects cub, like he would protect his daughter if she still walked among the living. The revelation struck Mary like a physical blow. This fearsome war chief, this man whose warriors had destroyed her life and taken everything from her, understood loss in the same way she did. He too had held someone precious and watched them slip away. He too carried the weight of grief that never fully lifted. For the first time since her capture, Mary felt something other than pure terror. It wasn't trust. Not yet, but it was the faintest glimmer of understanding, a recognition that perhaps beneath all the violence and cultural divide, some human experiences remained universal. Pain was pain, loss was loss. The love of a parent for a child transcended the boundaries of language and war. Chief Chanupahota turned to leave, but paused at the teepee entrance. He looked back at Mary one final time, his weathered face illuminated by the afternoon sun streaming through the opening. He spoke a few more words to Zitkala, his tone carrying the weight of command, then disappeared into the brightness outside. The young woman remained, settling herself near Mary with a gentle smile that transformed her serious face. Chief says I stay, help you with baby. Teach you our ways, our words, our customs. Camp is dangerous for woman alone who does not know how we live. Some women here, they lost family to white soldiers. They see you, they see enemy. They see yellow hair and blue eyes, and remember husbands killed, children taken to white man's schools far away. You learn our ways, you become safer. Understanding brings protection. Mary's throat tightened with unexpected emotion. She looked down at Emma, who had finished nursing and was now regarding the world with those bright, curious eyes that reminded Mary so much of Daniel. Her daughter was oblivious to the magnitude of what had just occurred, unaware that their circumstances had shifted in some fundamental way. They were still captives, still prisoners in a foreign world, but the chief's gesture had cracked open a door Mary hadn't known existed. It was the first act of genuine kindness she had experienced since the raid, the first suggestion that their future might hold something other than suffering. As Zitkala began to organize the provisions and gesture for Mary to eat, explaining in her limited English how to properly prepare the pemmican by mixing it with water to make it easier to chew, Mary's mind reeled with questions. Why had Chief Chanupahota shown them mercy? What did this mean for their future in the camp? Was this kindness temporary, or could it possibly lead to something more? She had heard stories of captives who were eventually adopted into tribes, who learned to live among their captors, and sometimes even chose to stay. The thought seemed impossible, even treasonous, given what had been done to Daniel. Yet here she sat, accepting food from the hands of her enemies, protected by the command of the man whose warriors had made her a widow. Zitkala noticed Mary's hesitation and gently pushed the food closer. "Eat," she encouraged. "For baby. Milk needs mother strong." She made a gesture of nursing, then pointed to the food again. "I had baby sister once. Mother's milk dried up when food was scarce during hard winter. Sister died. You must eat to feed little one." The matter-of-fact way she stated this tragedy spoke to the harsh realities of frontier life, where survival was never guaranteed and loss was a constant companion. Mary slowly reached for the pemmican, her fingers shaking as she brought the food to her mouth. The mixture of dried meat, fat, and berries was rich and filling, unlike anything she had tasted before. As she chewed, she felt strength beginning to return to her exhausted body. Zitkala watched approvingly, then offered the water skin. The water was cool and clean, drawn from the river that morning. As Mary drank, she realized how desperately thirsty she had been, how her body had been slowly weakening from inadequate food and water over the past weeks. That night, for the first time since her capture, Mary's stomach was full. Emma slept peacefully in her arms, warm and fed and safe for the moment. Zitkala had stayed with them until darkness fell, teaching Mary a few essential Lakota words and showing her how to properly arrange the sleeping robes to maximize warmth. She had demonstrated how to bank the small fire so it would burn slowly through the night, providing steady heat without needing constant attention. Before leaving, the young woman had promised to return at sunrise to continue helping Mary adapt to life in the camp. "Tomorrow I teach you how to walk in camp without drawing angry eyes," she had said. "How to show respect, how to make yourself small when needed, how to survive." As she drifted towards sleep, Mary heard the sounds of the camp settling into its nighttime rhythms. Somewhere nearby, a man sang a haunting melody that carried across the prairie wind, the words unintelligible but the emotion unmistakable. It was a song of longing, perhaps a prayer or a remembrance of someone lost. The river murmured its endless song over smooth stones. Dogs barked occasionally in the distance, and in the center of the camp, she knew Chief Chanupahota sat in council with his warriors, making decisions that would affect all their futures. She wondered what they discussed in those meetings, whether her presence in the camp was a topic of debate, whether there were those who opposed the chief's mercy. She thought about the look in his eyes when he had seen her nursing Emma, that flash of pain and memory that had transformed his stern face for just a moment. She thought about his lost wife and daughter, taken by disease rather than violence, but no less devastating for it. Smallpox, probably, or perhaps cholera. Diseases that had ravaged native populations with devastating efficiency. In that moment of recognition, something had passed between them, an acknowledgement that grief and love transcended the boundaries of culture and conflict. It didn't erase what had been done, It didn't bring Daniel back or undo the trauma of her capture, but it offered something Mary desperately needed, a reason to believe that survival might be possible, that the future didn't have to hold only darkness and despair. Outside her teepee, beneath the vast expanse of stars that stretched across the Dakota sky like scattered diamonds on black velvet, Chief Chanupahota sat alone by the dying fire. His mind was filled with memories of his wife, Wikapi, whose name meant star, and his daughter Anpei, whose name meant radiant, and whose laughter had once filled his lodge the way morning light fills the sky and chases away shadows. They had been taken from him by the spotted sickness that white traders had brought up the Missouri River 7 winters ago, a disease his people had no defense against, no medicine to cure, no prayers powerful enough to turn back. He remembered the day the sickness had appeared in their camp. At first, just a few people had fallen ill with fever and the terrible spots that gave the disease its name. Within weeks, it had spread like wildfire through dried grass, killing the young and old with terrifying speed. Wikapi had nursed the sick despite his warnings, her compassionate nature refusing to let her stand aside while her people suffered. She had contracted the illness and passed it to Anpei before anyone realized what was happening. Chief Chanupahota, strong warrior and leader though he was, had been powerless to save them. He had held his daughter as she burned with fever, had wiped his wife's brow as the spots covered her beautiful face, had sung death songs as they both slipped away into the spirit world within hours of each other. In the years since their deaths, he had hardened himself into the leader his tribe needed, a warrior and chief who could make difficult decisions and wage war when necessary to protect Lakota lands from the endless encroachment of settlers who seemed to multiply like locusts with each passing season. He had led successful raids against cavalry patrols, had negotiated with other tribes to form alliances, had proven himself worthy of the eagle feathers he wore and the respect his people showed him. But the wound of losing his family had never fully healed. It lived beneath his stern exterior, a constant ache that shaped his understanding of the world. Seeing the white woman nursing her child had reopened that wound in a way he hadn't anticipated. In her desperate protectiveness, in the way she had curled around her infant expecting violence, he had seen a mirror of his own past. He remembered holding his dying daughter, remembered his wife's last breaths, remembered the helplessness that had consumed him as the two people he loved most in the world slipped away despite all his strength and status. The white woman and her child were supposed to be his enemies, reminders of the people who were destroying his way of life, whose endless wagons cut ruts across the prairie, whose hunters slaughtered buffalo by the thousands and left the meat to rot, whose soldiers built forts on sacred ground and broke every treaty their leaders signed. Yet in that moment when he had discovered her nursing her infant, they had simply been a mother and child, vulnerable and afraid, deserving of protection rather than cruelty. The baby's tiny hands clutching at her mother, the woman's haunted eyes, the universal intimacy of that act of nourishment and care. All of it had spoken to something deeper than the politics of land and the cycle of revenge that defined relations between their peoples. His decision to show them mercy had surprised even himself, had come from a place beyond strategic thinking or careful consideration of consequences. Some of his warriors would question his decision, he knew. The hatred between their peoples ran deep, fed by countless acts of violence on both sides. Settlers pushed ever westward, killing buffalo for sport and hides, taking land that treaties had promised would remain Lakota territory forever, breaking agreements as casually as snapping dry twigs. His people fought back, raiding homesteads that appeared on their hunting grounds, attacking wagon trains that cut through sacred lands, defending territory that had belonged to them since time beyond memory. In this endless cycle of retribution, mercy was often seen as weakness, compassion as betrayal of those who had suffered at white hands. Yet Chief Chanupahota had not become a leader by following only the expected path. He had earned his position through wisdom as well as strength, through knowing when to fight and when to seek another way. His father, also a chief, had taught him that true leadership meant seeing beyond the immediate moment, understanding that every action created ripples that spread far into the future. As he stared into the glowing embers of the fire, he made a silent promise to the memory of his lost family. This woman and child would be protected. They would learn the ways of the Lakota people, and perhaps, in some small way, showing them mercy would honor the wife and daughter he could not save, would give meaning to losses that otherwise seemed to hold only pain and emptiness. The morning sun broke over the eastern hills, painting the Lakota camp in shades of gold and amber as Mary woke to the sound of footsteps approaching her teepee. Emma stirred against her chest, making the small, contented noises that meant she had slept well through the night. For a brief moment, before full consciousness returned, Mary forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back, the buffalo hide walls, the unfamiliar sounds of the camp coming to life, the weight of her captivity settling over her like a heavy blanket. But something was different this morning. The gnawing hunger that had become her constant companion was absent, replaced by the satisfied feeling of having eaten well the night before. Zitkala pushed aside the teepee flap and entered with a bundle tucked under her arm and a warm smile on her young face. The early light caught the beadwork on her dress, simple but beautifully crafted, and Mary noticed for the first time how graceful the young woman's movements were, each gesture purposeful and efficient. "Good morning," Zitkala said in her careful English, setting down the bundle. "I bring dress for you. Cannot wear torn white woman clothes here. Draw too much attention, make you target." She unfolded the bundle to reveal a doe-skin dress, soft and supple, decorated with modest quill work along the shoulders. It was clearly well made, but not ornate, practical clothing that would allow Mary to blend into the camp rather than stand out. Mary ran her fingers over the soft leather, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "This is beautiful," she whispered, her voice rough from disuse. She hadn't spoken much in the weeks since her capture, having no one to talk to and learning quickly that silence was safer than attempting communication. "Where did this come from?" Zitkala's expression grew solemn. "It belonged to my cousin. She died last winter giving birth. Baby died too. Her husband gave away her things, too painful to keep. When I asked if I could have dress for white captive, he said yes. Said maybe it brings better fortune to someone else." The story sent a chill through Mary. Death was so commonplace here, so woven into the fabric of daily life that people spoke of it with a matter-of-fact acceptance. She found both admirable and terrifying. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said quietly. "Thank you for this kindness." Zitkala nodded, then gestured for Mary to stand. "Come, I help you dress, then we go to river. You wash. I teach you how to care for baby the Lakota way. Chief Chanupa says you must learn our customs quickly. Not all in camp are happy you are here. Some women lost much to white settlers. They see your face and remember pain." With Zitkala's help, Mary changed into the doe-skin dress, feeling strange in the unfamiliar garment but grateful for clothing that wasn't torn and filthy. The leather was surprisingly comfortable, moving with her body in a way her old calico dress never had. Zitkala also provided soft moccasins to replace Mary's worn boots, showing her how to tie them properly so they wouldn't slip. "Now you look more like us," the young woman observed with satisfaction. "Yellow hair still marks you as different, but clothes help. Come bring baby. River is safe place in morning. Women gather there, but I stay close to you." They emerged from the teepee into the crisp morning air. The camp was fully awake now, a bustling community of perhaps 100 people spread across the riverside flat. Smoke rose from cooking fires, children chased each other between the lodges, and women moved about their morning tasks with practiced efficiency. Mary kept her eyes downcast as Zitkala had taught her, but she was acutely aware of the stares that followed them. She heard whispers in Lakota, words she couldn't understand, but whose tone conveyed suspicion and hostility. One older woman actually spat on the ground as they passed, her weathered face twisted with contempt. Zitkala quickened their pace. guiding Mary toward the river where several women were already gathered, filling water skins and washing clothes in the clear, cold water. The river was perhaps 30 feet wide at this point, flowing swiftly over a bed of smooth stones. Cottonwood trees lined the banks, their leaves rustling in the morning breeze. It was a beautiful spot, peaceful despite the tension Mary felt radiating from some of the women who watched their approach. Zitkala led her to a quiet section slightly upstream from the others, a tactful distance that allowed Mary to wash without crowding the other women. As Mary knelt by the water's edge and began to carefully clean Emma, Zitkala kept up a running commentary, teaching her Lakota words for common objects and actions. Water is Emenai. River is Wakpa. Baby is Hokshichunkia. She pointed to each thing as she named it, patient when Mary struggled with the unfamiliar sounds. You learn our language. People see you trying to respect our ways. Makes things easier. Emma cooed and splashed in the cool water, delighting in the sensation. Her cheerful sounds drew the attention of a young girl, perhaps 7 years old, who had been watching from a distance with curious eyes. The girl edged closer, fascinated by Emma's fair skin and light hair. She said something to Zitkala in rapid Lakota, gesturing toward the baby. Zitkala responded, then turned to Mary. She asks if your baby is sick. She has never seen skin so pale. Thinks maybe it is illness. Mary felt a pang of sadness for what this represented, how foreign and strange her own child appeared to these people. Tell her no, Emma is healthy. This is just how we look. Tell her she can come closer if she wants, Zitkala translated, and the girl approached shyly, reaching out a tentative finger to touch Emma's wispy blonde hair. Emma, who had always been a friendly baby, grabbed the girl's finger and gurgled happily. The girl's face broke into a delighted smile, and she laughed, a sound of pure joy that transcended all cultural barriers. She called out to other children playing nearby, and soon Mary found herself surrounded by a small group of curious youngsters, all wanting to see the strange, pale baby. Their innocent fascination broke through some of the morning's tension, and even a few of the women watching from downstream seemed to soften slightly at the sight. One woman, however, did not soften. She was perhaps 40 years old, with a proud bearing and hard eyes that fixed on Mary with unmistakable hatred. She strode over to the children and barked commands that sent them scattering like startled birds. Then she turned to Zitkala and spoke in harsh, clipped Lakota, her meaning clear even without translation. This was not welcome. Mary was not welcome. The woman's hands moved in sharp, angry gestures as she spoke, and Mary instinctively pulled Emma closer, preparing to flee if necessary. Zitkala stood her ground, her young voice firm as she responded. The exchange grew heated, with the older woman clearly asserting some kind of authority or grievance. Finally, Zitkala turned to Mary and said quietly, "This is Wakinyela. Her husband and 2 sons were killed by cavalry soldiers 3 moons ago. She says you do not belong here. That chief is foolish to show mercy to white woman. She says your people are destroyers, that you will bring bad fortune to camp." Mary's heart sank. But before she could respond, another voice cut through the tension. A woman even older than Wakinyela approached from downstream, moving with the careful dignity of advanced age. Her face was deeply lined, her long gray hair worn in traditional braids, and she carried herself with an authority that made even Wakinyela step back. She spoke in a voice that was quiet but carried weight, addressing Wakinyela first, then the gathered women who had stopped their work to watch the confrontation. Zitkala whispered quick translations. "This is Winona, eldest woman in camp. Very respected. She reminds Wakinyela that Chief Chanupahota has spoken, and his word is law. She says grief makes us want to strike at any target, but wisdom requires us to see individuals, not just enemies." Winona approached Mary directly and looked down at Emma with eyes that had seen countless seasons come and go. She said something in Lakota, her tone gentler now. Zitkala translated. "She says your baby has strong spirit. She can see it in her eyes. She says any mother who protects her child with such courage deserves respect." no matter what people she comes from. The old woman reached out and touched Emma's cheek with a gnarled finger, then spoke again. She asks what is baby's name. Mary's voice shook as she answered. Emma? Her name is Emma. Winona repeated the name carefully, then nodded. She turned and addressed the gathered women once more, her words carrying the weight of wisdom earned through long life. Whatever she said seemed to settle the matter, because the women slowly returned to their tasks, though many still cast suspicious glances in Mary's direction. Joaquiniela stood rigid for a long moment, her jaw clenched, before finally turning and walking away, her back straight with barely contained fury. After the old woman left, Zitkala let out a breath she had been holding. That was fortunate. Winona's words carry much weight. She lost family to white soldiers too many years ago, but she has seen enough seasons to know that hatred only breeds more hatred. Not everyone will be convinced, but her support helps. She helped Mary gather their things. Come, we return to your teepee. I teach you how to make proper cradle board for Emma. Will be safer for her when you work, and you will need to work. Everyone in camp works. No one is permitted to be idle. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Back at the teepee, Zitkala produced materials for the cradle board, thin strips of willow wood, soft leather and padding made from cattail down. As she demonstrated the construction process, she continued teaching Mary about life in the Lakota camp. In afternoon, women gather to tan hides. You will join them. Keep your head down, work hard, speak little. Show them you are willing to learn, willing to contribute. Some will remain hostile, but others will slowly accept. This is the way it has always been with captives who become part of Trib. Mary's hands fumbled with the materials, unused to this kind of craftwork, but she persisted. Has this happened before? Other captives joining the tribe? Zitkala nodded as she guided Mary's hands to the correct position. Yes, several times. Some were traded for, some were adopted after proving themselves worthy. My own grandmother was Crow, taken in raid when she was a young girl. She learned Lakota ways, married Lakota warrior, raised Lakota children. Now no one remembers she was once enemy. She is simply Winona, wise woman of the people. This revelation stunned Mary. The old woman who had just defended her was herself once a captive from another tribe. It offered a glimmer of hope that perhaps, given time, she and Emma might find a similar path. Does she ever speak of her old life? Of the Crow people? Zitkala paused in her work. Sometimes, when she tells stories to children, she says she remembers her birth mother's face, her Crow name that she no longer uses. But she says, this is her home now, these are her people. The past is the past. What matters is how we live today. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the cradle board slowly taking shape under their combined efforts. Emma slept peacefully nearby, unaware of the complex world she'd been born into. Through the teepee walls, Mary could hear the sounds of camp life, the rhythmic pounding of someone working leather, voices calling to each other, horses whinnying in the distance. It was strange how quickly these foreign sounds were becoming familiar, how her ear was beginning to distinguish individual voices and patterns in the daily routine. As the sun climbed toward midday, Zitkala announced the cradle board was finished. She showed Mary how to secure Emma in it, the baby snug and safe, with just her face visible. Now she can be with you while you work and your hands are free. This is how Lakota mothers carry babies. Keeps them close, but allows mother to do what must be done. Emma seemed content in her new carrier, her bright eyes taking in the world from this different vantage point. Mary felt a surge of gratitude for this young woman who had appeared in her life like an unexpected gift. Zitkala led Mary to where a group of women had gathered in the shade of several large cottonwoods, working on buffalo hides stretched on wooden frames. The smell was pungent, a mixture of raw hide, wood smoke, and the various substances used in the tanning process. Several women looked up as they approached, their expressions ranging from curious to unwelcoming. Joaquiniela was among them, her face hardening at the sight of Mary, but she said nothing. returning her attention to the hide she was scraping with fierce, aggressive strokes. Zitkala spoke to the women in Lakota, and one of them, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, gestured to an empty frame. She handed Mary a scraping tool, a piece of sharpened bone attached to a wooden handle, and demonstrated the proper technique for removing hair and flesh from the hide. The work was physically demanding, requiring strength and endurance Mary wasn't sure she possessed. But she attacked the task with determination, knowing that her acceptance in this community depended on proving her willingness to contribute. The hours passed slowly, marked by the ache in Mary's arms and back as she scraped at the stubborn hide. The other women worked with practiced efficiency, their tools moving in steady rhythms that spoke of years of experience. Occasionally, they conversed among themselves, and though Mary couldn't understand the words, she caught the cadence of gossip, complaints, and shared stories that women everywhere exchange while working together. Emma slept in her cradleboard, propped against a nearby tree, occasionally waking to look around before drifting off again. The kind woman who had first shown Mary the technique periodically checked her work, offering corrections through gestures and patient demonstration. Unlike Wakinyela's hostility or the studied indifference of some others, this woman seemed genuinely willing to help. During a brief rest, she pointed to herself and said, "Tachawin." Mary understood this was her name and responded by pointing to herself and saying, "Mary." Tachawin repeated the name carefully, then smiled and nodded. It was a small moment of connection, but it meant everything to Mary in that moment. As the afternoon wore on, Mary's hands began to blister, despite her best efforts to maintain proper grip on the scraping tool. She tried to hide her discomfort, but Tachawin noticed and called Zitkala over. After a brief conversation, Zitkala explained, "She says you have done enough for first day. Hands must toughen gradually, or they will become too damaged to work tomorrow. Come, we get medicine for blisters." The relief Mary felt was overwhelming. She hadn't realized how much pain she had been enduring until given permission to stop. Tachawin led them to her teepee, larger and more decorated than Mary's simple shelter, indicating this woman held some status in the community. Inside, the space was organized and comfortable, with cooking implements, storage bags, and personal items all carefully arranged. Tachawin rummaged in a parfleche box and produced a small container of salve. She took Mary's hands and gently applied the medicine to the blisters, her touch surprisingly tender. She spoke in Lakota, her tone motherly, and though Mary couldn't understand the words, the kindness was unmistakable. Zitkala translated, "She says you worked hard today, harder than expected for someone not used to our ways. She says this shows good character, that you are not lazy or arrogant like some white settlers who come to our lands thinking themselves better than us. She lost a daughter last year to the coughing sickness and sees something of her in you. She will help teach you our ways." Mary felt tears prick her eyes at this unexpected compassion. "Please tell her thank you. Tell her I am grateful for her kindness, and I will work hard to learn." After Zitkala translated, Tachawin smiled warmly and pressed the container of salve into Mary's hands, indicating she should keep it. Then she gestured for them to sit, producing dried meat and berries for them to share. As they ate, other women began arriving at the teepee, and Mary realized this was some kind of social gathering, an end-of-day ritual where women came together to talk and relax after their labor. She felt awkward and out of place, but Zitkala stayed close, translating occasional comments and helping her navigate this unfamiliar social terrain. One woman asked about Emma, and soon the baby was being passed around, examined and cooed over by the gathered women. Despite their earlier suspicion, the universal appeal of an infant broke down some barriers. Emma, for her part, seemed perfectly content with the attention, gurgling and smiling at her admirers. Mary watched nervously, every maternal instinct on high alert. But the women handled her daughter with practiced care, the gentle confidence of those who had raised many children. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, The women gradually dispersed to prepare evening meals for their families. Tatawin gave Mary a small bag of cornmeal and showed her through gestures how to prepare a simple porridge over her teepee fire. Zitkala helped her get the fire going properly, demonstrating the right arrangement of wood and the technique for managing the smoke. "Tomorrow morning I come again," the young woman said as she prepared to leave. "We continue your lessons. Chief Chanupa Hota wants to see your progress in 3 days. He will judge if you can stay or if you must be sent away." This news sent a spike of fear through Mary. Sent where? What would happen to us? Zitkala's expression was grave. "There are traders who deal in captives. They take them south to New Mexico territory, sell them to Mexican families, or sometimes to white settlements far away. If Chief decides you are too much trouble, too disruptive to camp harmony, he will trade you. This is why you must learn quickly, must show you can become part of tribe rather than remaining outsider who causes division." After Zitkala left, Mary sat by her small fire, holding Emma close and contemplating the precariousness of their situation. 3 days to prove herself worthy of staying, worthy of the protection Chief Chanupa Hota had extended. The thought of being sold away, of ending up in some unknown place among strangers who had purchased her like livestock, was terrifying. At least here, despite the hostility of some, she was beginning to understand the rules and rhythms of life. She had allies in Zitkala, Takchawin, and perhaps old Winona, and she had the chief's mysterious protection, rooted in his own grief and loss. She looked down at Emma, who had fallen asleep after nursing, her tiny face peaceful and innocent. "We'll make it work, my darling girl," Mary whispered. "Whatever it takes, we'll prove we belong here. We'll learn their ways, earn their respect, and somehow build a life in this strange new world." Outside, the camp settled into its evening routine. Fires glowed in the growing darkness, and the smell of cooking food drifted on the cool air. Somewhere nearby, a flute played a haunting melody, its notes carrying across the quiet camp. Mary prepared the cornmeal porridge as Takawin had shown her, grateful for the simple but nourishing food. As she ate, she noticed a figure pass by her teepee, pausing briefly in the shadows. She recognized the silhouette of Chief Chanupa Hota, making his evening rounds through the camp. He didn't enter or speak, but his presence felt deliberate, a silent reminder that he was watching, ensuring his orders regarding her safety were being followed. After a moment he moved on, his footsteps fading into the night. That night, as Mary lay on her sleeping robes with Emma tucked safely against her, she reflected on everything the day had brought. The hostility she had expected, yes, but also unexpected kindnesses. The exhausting physical labor, but also the satisfaction of contributing rather than being a passive prisoner. The fear of an uncertain future, but also the glimmer of hope that survival was possible if she could adapt quickly enough. She thought of Winona, once a Crow captive, now a respected Lakota elder. If such transformation was possible, perhaps there was a path forward for her and Emma too. The camp grew quiet as people settled in for the night. In the distance, a coyote called, its lonely voice carrying across the dark plains. The river murmured its constant song, and in her small teepee on the edge of the Lakota camp, Mary Calhoun allowed herself to believe, for the first time since her capture, that tomorrow might bring something other than despair. She had 3 days to prove herself, 3 days to demonstrate that she could become part of this world rather than remaining forever an outsider. As sleep finally claimed her exhausted body, her last conscious thought was a prayer, not to be saved from this place, but to be given the strength and wisdom to survive within it. The second day dawned with an unexpected chill in the air, a harbinger of the autumn that would soon sweep across the plains. Mary woke to find frost coating the ground outside her teepee, delicate ice crystals that would melt within hours, but served as a stark reminder that winter was approaching. Emma fussed more than usual, sensitive to the cold, and Mary wrapped her in every scrap of hide and fabric she possessed before venturing out to meet Zitkala. The young woman arrived as promised, this time carrying a thick buffalo robe that she draped around Mary's shoulders without comment. The warmth was immediate and desperately needed. Today's lessons began not with physical labor, but with language. Zitkala sat with Mary inside the teepee, using objects and gestures to teach essential Lakota words and phrases. "This is crucial," she explained in her careful English. "You must be able to understand basic commands, greetings, warnings. Yesterday some women spoke to you and you could not respond. This makes them think you are stupid or deliberately disrespectful. Neither is good." She held up various items: a knife, a water skin, a piece of dried meat, a sewing awl, naming each one and having Mary repeat the words until her tongue began to wrap around the unfamiliar sounds. The learning was frustrating and exhausting in ways different from physical labor. Mary's mind felt sluggish, overwhelmed by the task of absorbing a completely foreign language while simultaneously caring for Emma and remaining alert to potential dangers. But Zitkala proved to be a patient teacher, breaking down complex phrases into manageable pieces and using humor to ease the tension when Mary made particularly awkward mistakes. "No, no," she laughed when Mary accidentally asked for a horse instead of water. "Unless you plan to drink a horse, try again." By midday, Mary had acquired a basic vocabulary of perhaps 30 words and could construct simple sentences following Zitkala's patterns. It wasn't much, but it was a foundation. More importantly, Zitkala taught her the proper way to greet people, how to show respect to elders, and the critical difference between addressing men and women. "Lakota has different forms depending on who speaks and who listens," she explained. "Woman speaks differently to man than to another woman. You must learn these rules, or you will give offense without meaning to." Their language lesson was interrupted by shouting from the center of camp. Zitkala's head snapped up, her body instantly alert. "Stay here!" she commanded, but the urgency in her voice made Mary follow her to the teepee entrance. A group of warriors had returned from what appeared to be a scouting expedition, and they were clearly agitated about something. The men gestured emphatically as they spoke to Chief Chanupa Hota, who listened with his characteristic stern expression. Other tribe members gathered around, drawn by the commotion. Zitkala listened intently to the rapid conversation, her face growing increasingly troubled. Finally she turned to Mary. "Cavalry patrol spotted 2 days' ride from here. 20 soldiers, maybe more. They are moving along the Powder River, burning Lakota camps they find, taking captives to the fort." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "If they come here and find you, there will be fighting. Soldiers will try to rescue white captive. Many will die on both sides. Chief must decide what to do." The implications crashed over Mary like a cold wave. She was a liability, a potential spark that could ignite violence and death. If the cavalry discovered her presence in the camp, they would indeed attempt a rescue, regardless of the cost. The Lakota would defend their territory and their autonomy. Blood would be spilled because of her. She watched Chief Chanupa Hota dismiss the warriors and stride toward the council area, his movements purposeful and controlled despite the gravity of the news. Several elder warriors and older women, including Winona, followed him. Zitkala pulled Mary back inside the teepee. "Council will meet. They will discuss whether to move camp, whether to send warriors to track the soldiers, whether to hide you or send you away." Her young face was troubled. "Some will argue that you should be given to the soldiers to avoid conflict. Others will say that giving in to soldier demands is weakness, that we must show strength. Chief will have to choose a path that protects the tribe while not appearing to bend to white man's threats." The waiting was agonizing. Mary tried to occupy herself with tasks, organizing her meager possessions, tending to Emma, practicing the Lakota words she had learned that morning. But her mind kept returning to the council meeting, happening somewhere in the camp center. Her fate, and more importantly Emma's fate, was being decided by people she barely knew, in a language she couldn't understand, according to customs and priorities completely foreign to her experience. The powerlessness was suffocating. Hours passed before Zitkala returned, her expression unreadable. She sat down across from Mary and took a moment to gather her thoughts before speaking. Council has decided. Camp will not move yet. Soldiers are still far enough away. Warriors will watch their movements. If soldiers turn toward us, we will have warning. She paused, meeting Mary's eyes directly. Chief Chanupahota argued strongly that you should not be given away. He said that to surrender, you would be to accept that white soldiers can dictate what happens in Lakota camps. He said this would make us weak in the eyes of other tribes and encourage more soldier demands. His words carried the day, but not everyone agreed. Relief flooded through Mary, quickly followed by guilt. People might die defending her presence here, people who owed her nothing, who had their own reasons to hate everything she represented. What did the dissenters say? She asked quietly. Zitkala's expression was grave. Wakinyela spoke against you as expected. She said you are a curse, that keeping you brings soldier trouble to our people. She said Chief lets his grief cloud his judgment, that he sees his dead daughter when he looks at your baby, and this makes him foolish. Others agreed with her, but not enough to override Chief's authority. The mention of the Chief's grief sent a pang through Mary's heart. She thought of him sitting alone by the fire, haunted by memories of a wife and daughter taken by disease. His protection of her and Emma was rooted in that loss, a way of salvaging something from tragedy, of protecting in death what he couldn't protect in life. It was both touching and troubling, this protection born from trauma rather than any genuine regard for her as an individual. But she was in no position to question his motivations. Whatever the reason, his decision to shield her was the only thing standing between Emma and an uncertain fate. Zitkala continued. Chief has given new orders regarding you. Starting tomorrow, you will move to a teepee closer to the camp center near Takawin's lodge. This serves two purposes. It shows the tribe that you are being integrated rather than kept separate as a prisoner, and it places you where you can be better protected if trouble comes. Tachawin has agreed to sponsor you, to take responsibility for teaching you our ways. She smiled slightly. This is good. Tachawin is well respected. Her support will help counter Wakinyela's opposition. That evening, as promised, Mary's few possessions were moved to a better teepee in a more central location. The lodge was larger than her previous shelter, with room for a proper fire pit and storage for supplies. Dachawin herself helped Mary settle in, bringing additional robes for warmth and a cooking pot for preparing meals. Through Zitkala's translation, she explained, "You are now part of my household. You will work alongside me, learn from me, and eat at my fire. In return, you will help with my tasks and show proper respect. Do you agree to these terms?" Mary nodded emphatically, understanding that this was an enormous privilege being offered. "Yes, I am grateful for your kindness and will work hard to prove myself worthy of it." Tachawin seemed satisfied with this response. She showed Mary where to store her things, how to bank the fire for the night, and which neighboring tepees housed families she should know. One lodge belonged to Tachawin's son and his wife, another to her sister's family. By placing Mary here, Tachawin was essentially bringing her into the protective circle of her extended family. As night fell, Tachawin invited Mary to share the evening meal at her fire. Several family members gathered, including Tachawin's son, a serious-faced warrior named Chaitan, and his pregnant wife, Kimimela. The couple studied Mary with cautious curiosity, but followed Tachawin's lead in treating her with basic courtesy. The meal was simple but ample: roasted prairie dog meat, boiled corn, and the ubiquitous pemmican that seemed to be a staple of Lakota diet. Emma, held securely in her cradleboard, watched the gathering with wide eyes, taking in the faces and voices around her. During the meal, a young boy of perhaps 10 years burst into the gathering, breathless and excited. He spoke rapidly in Lakota, and Mary caught the name Chanupahota among his words. The adult's expressions grew serious, and Chaitan immediately stood, checking the knife at his belt. Tachawin spoke to Zitkala, who had joined them for the meal, and the young woman quickly translated for Mary. "Scouts report the cavalry patrol has changed direction. They are heading away from Lakota territory, toward the fort. Threat is passing for now. The relief in the gathering was palpable. Chaitan sat back down, and conversations resumed with lighter tones. But Mary noticed how quickly these people could shift from peaceful domesticity to readiness for conflict. How the warriors kept their weapons close, even during meals. How the women maintained a constant awareness of their children's locations. This was a people living on the edge of constant danger, where peace was always temporary and vigilance was the price of survival. Later, as Mary prepared Emma for sleep in their new lodge, Tachawin came to check on them one final time. Through gestures and the few words they could share, she communicated that tomorrow they would work together, preparing winter stores, drying meat and gathering roots before the cold weather arrived. It was clear that Tachawin was taking her responsibilities seriously, truly intending to train Mary in the skills she would need to survive a plains winter. The older woman touched Emma's head gently, said something soft in Lakota, then left Mary alone with her thoughts. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. The third day arrived with a strange weight of significance. This was the day Chief Chanupahota would judge whether Mary's progress was sufficient to warrant continued protection. She woke before dawn, anxiety churning in her stomach as she nursed Emma and tried to calm her racing thoughts. When Zitkala arrived, the young woman sensed Mary's nervousness immediately. "Be confident," she advised. "Show Chief you have learned that you are trying to adapt. He is stern but fair. If he sees genuine effort, he will support you." The morning was spent helping Tachawin process a deer that hunters had brought in the previous evening. Mary watched carefully as the older woman demonstrated how to skin the animal properly, preserving the hide without damaging it. The work was bloody and difficult, requiring strength and precision Mary didn't naturally possess. Her hands, still tender from the hide scraping 2 days earlier, protested as she gripped the skinning knife and tried to follow Tachawin's example. But she persisted, ignoring the discomfort, determined to show competence. By midday, they had successfully processed the deer, with the meat set to dry on wooden racks and the hide stretched for tanning. Mary's arms ached, and her dress was spattered with blood, but Tachawin nodded approval at her work. "Waste," she said in careful English, one of the few words she had learned to communicate directly with Mary. She gestured to the complete utilization of the animal. Nothing wasted, everything purposeful. Mary understood. This was a fundamental value here, the respectful and complete use of what the land provided. In the afternoon, word spread through camp that Chief Chanupahota wished to see Mary. Her heart hammered as Zitkala led her toward the chief's lodge, a large and well-appointed teepee in the camp's center, decorated with painted symbols Mary didn't yet understand. Emma was secure in her cradleboard on Mary's back, and she drew strength from the baby's warm presence. Outside the chief's lodge, they waited while Zitkala announced their arrival. After a moment, they were beckoned inside. The interior of Chief Chanupahota's lodge was larger than Mary expected, with space for multiple people to sit comfortably around a central fire. The walls were lined with weapons, shields, and medicine bundles, each item speaking to the chief's status and history. He sat across the fire, his weathered face illuminated by the flickering flames, and gestured for Mary to sit. Zitkala settled beside her, ready to translate. For a long moment the chief simply looked at Mary, his dark eyes assessing her in a way that felt like he was reading her very soul. When he finally spoke, his voice was measured and calm, but carried absolute authority. Zitkala translated. "Chief asks how you have spent these 3 days. He wants to know what you have learned, how you have contributed to the tribe." Mary took a breath, organizing her thoughts before responding. "Tell him I have learned many words in Lakota language. I can greet people properly, ask for basic needs, understand simple commands. I have worked on hides with the women, processed a deer with Tachawin today. I've tried to show respect to everyone, keep my eyes down, not cause trouble." Tachawin has agreed to sponsor me and teach me more. As Zitkala translated, Mary watched the chief's face for any reaction. His expression remained neutral, but she thought she detected a slight softening around his eyes. He responded, and Zitkala conveyed his words. Chief says Tachawin spoke well of you. She told council you work hard and show proper attitude. This is important. He asks, do you understand why you are here? Do you understand the position you hold in this camp? Mary chose her words carefully, knowing this might be the most important thing she ever said. Tell him I understand that I am a captive, taken in war between our peoples. I understand that many here have lost family to white soldiers and settlers, and that my presence is painful for them. I understand that he has shown me mercy when he did not have to, and that this mercy comes from his own experience of loss. I'm grateful for his protection. I will work to earn my place here, to become useful to the tribe, to raise my daughter to respect Lakota ways. I do not expect to ever return to the white world. This is my life now, and I accept that. The chief listened to the translation with an intensity that was almost physical. When Zitkala finished, he sat silent for a long moment, his gaze never leaving Mary's face. Finally he spoke again, longer this time, his words carrying weight. Zitkala's voice grew softer as she translated. Chief says he sees truth in your words. He says you have shown courage and willingness to adapt, which are qualities the Lakota people respect. He says you remind him of his wife, who also had to learn new ways when she came to his lodge from another band. She too was frightened at first, but she became strong, became a mother, became beloved by all who knew her. The chief paused, then continued speaking. Zitkala's eyes grew wider as she listened, and her voice held a note of surprise as she translated. Chief has decided you will no longer be considered captive. You will be adopted into the tribe as Tachawin's daughter. This means you are under her family's protection and have rights and responsibilities like any Lakota woman. You will be given a Lakota name at the next gathering. Your daughter will be raised as Lakota child. This is a great honor, offered only because Chief sees potential in you and believes you can truly become one of the people. Mary felt tears spring to her eyes, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. Adoption meant safety, belonging, a future for Emma that didn't involve being traded away or living forever as an outsider. But it also meant fully accepting this new identity, leaving behind any hope of returning to her former life. She looked down at Emma, who gazed back at her with those innocent, trusting eyes. For her daughter's sake, there was only one answer. Tell him I accept with gratitude and humility. Tell him I will strive every day to be worthy of this honor. The chief nodded once, decisively, then stood, indicating the meeting was concluded. But before Mary could leave, he spoke directly to her in halting English, words he had clearly prepared. Your man killed in raid. I'm sorry for this. War is hard on all peoples. But here you safe, baby safe. Learn our ways, honor our customs, you have home with Lakota people. The effort it took him to say these words in her language was evident, and Mary was deeply moved by the gesture. Outside the chief's lodge, Mary stood blinking in the bright afternoon sunlight, barely able to process what had just occurred. Zitkala squeezed her arm, excitement clear on her young face. This is wonderful news. Adoptions do not happen often. Chief must truly believe in you. Come, we must tell Tachawin. She will need to prepare for the ceremony. Word of the chief's decision spread through the camp rapidly, carried on the wind of gossip and speculation. Reactions were mixed, as Mary discovered when they returned to Tachawin's area. Some women congratulated Tachawin on her new daughter, seeing the adoption as appropriate and generous. Others, particularly those in Wakinyela's circle, were openly disapproving. Mary overheard angry conversations in Lakota, and though she couldn't understand all the words, the hostile tone was unmistakable. Zitkala confirmed her fears. Wakinyela is very angry. She says Chief favors you too much because you remind him of his lost family. She says this is not justice, that white women should not be rewarded while Lakota women grieve their dead. Tachawin, however, seemed genuinely pleased by the development. She fussed over Mary, bringing her better clothing and beginning to teach her the specific responsibilities she would have as an adopted daughter. Through Zitkala's translation, she explained, "At the ceremony, you will be given new name. Old identity falls away, new identity begins. You will stand before the tribe and accept the name and the obligations it carries. From that moment, you are Lakota, no longer white, no longer outsider. Your past is forgotten. Your future is with the people." That evening, as Mary sat in her lodge with Emma sleeping peacefully beside her, she reflected on the astonishing turn her life had taken. Just days ago, she had been a terrified captive expecting death at any moment. Now she was to be formally adopted, given a place in the tribe, offered a path to belonging that she had never imagined possible. The price was everything she had been, complete surrender of her old identity, her old world, her old dreams. But what choice did she have? And more than that, what did that old world offer her now? Her husband was dead, her home was destroyed, and the frontier life that had seemed so full of promise had revealed itself to be brutal and unforgiving. She thought about Daniel, wondering what he would think of her decision to embrace Lakota identity. Would he understand that she was choosing survival for their daughter? Would he forgive her for accepting life among the people who had killed him? These questions had no answers, but they haunted her nonetheless. Yet beneath the guilt and confusion, Mary felt something else stirring, a cautious, fragile sense of possibility. Perhaps here, in this unexpected place among these unlikely people, she and Emma could build something new, something that honored the past while reaching toward a different future. Outside her lodge, the camp settled into its nighttime rhythms. Children were called in from their play, fires were banked, quiet conversations drifted on the evening air. Somewhere in the darkness, Chief Chanupahota sat in contemplation, perhaps thinking of his own lost family, perhaps wondering if his decision to spare and now adopt this white woman and her child would prove wise or foolish. Only time would reveal the consequences of the mercy he had shown, the unexpected compassion that had shocked his entire tribe and set in motion changes no one could yet foresee. The adoption ceremony was scheduled for the full moon, still 5 days away, giving Mary time to prepare and the tribe time to absorb the chief's controversial decision. Those 5 days proved to be among the most challenging of her captivity. While some tribe members accepted Chief Chanupahota's judgment without question, others made their displeasure known through cold stares, deliberate exclusion from conversations, and small acts of sabotage. Mary discovered her water skin slashed one morning, found her drying meat knocked to the ground and trampled, and once returned to her lodge to find it had been searched, her meager possessions scattered carelessly across the floor. Dutchawin responded to these incidents with quiet fury, making it known throughout camp that anyone who harmed her adopted daughter would answer to her family. Chaitan, her warrior son, took to walking past Mary's lodge several times daily, a silent but unmistakable warning to potential troublemakers. The protection was necessary and appreciated, but it also deepened the divide in the camp, creating factions that either supported or opposed Mary's integration. The tension was exhausting, a constant weight that made every interaction fraught with potential conflict. Zitkala continued her language lessons with increased urgency, knowing that Mary would need to speak for herself during the ceremony. They practiced the formal phrases she would need to recite, the acceptance of her new name and identity, the pledges of loyalty to the tribe, and respect for Lakota customs. Mary's pronunciation improved daily, though the language's complex sounds still sometimes defeated her tongue. "I'm close enough," Zitkala would say, with an encouraging smile when Mary struggled with a particularly difficult word. The effort matters as much as perfection. People will see you are trying. On the 3rd day before the ceremony, a new complication arose. A group of Cheyenne traders arrived at camp, bringing goods for exchange and news from other tribes. Among them was a mixed-blood interpreter who spoke both Lakota and English fluently. His presence drew immediate attention, as such linguistic bridges were rare and valuable. Chief Chanupahota spent hours in conference with the traders, discussing territorial movements, cavalry activities, and the complex web of alliances and conflicts that defined Plains politics. Mary watched from a distance, curious about these visitors who moved freely between the native and white worlds. The interpreter, a lean man in his 30s who went by the name Thomas Bridger, sought Mary out on the second day of the trader's visit. He approached her lodge while she was working with Takawin, preparing buffalo sinew for sewing. His sudden appearance and greeting in English startled her so profoundly that she dropped the sinew and simply stared at him. It had been weeks since she had heard her native language spoken by anyone other than Zitkala, whose broken English was useful but limited. Hearing fluent English felt surreal, like a voice from another lifetime. "Mrs. Calhoun, I presume," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of frontier courtesy that seemed absurdly out of place in the Lakota camp. "I heard about your situation from the chief. Quite a remarkable turn of events, if you don't mind me saying. Adoption is rare, especially for someone so recently captured." His eyes, a striking hazel that spoke to his mixed heritage, assessed her with frank curiosity. "I wanted to offer you something that may be of interest. I'm heading to Fort Laramie next month. If you wanted to send word to any surviving family, or if you wanted passage back to white civilization, I could arrange it." The offer hung in the air between them. Laden with implications Mary was only beginning to process. Behind her, she felt Takawin's presence, the older woman watching this exchange with concern, despite not understanding the words. Mary's mind raced. Here was an opportunity, perhaps her only opportunity, to reclaim her old life, to return to the world she had known. But what awaited her there? She had no family, her parents having died years ago and her only sibling, a brother, having moved to California before she married Daniel. The homestead was destroyed. She had no money, no property, no prospects. And more importantly, what would happen to Emma in that world? A widow with an infant and no resources faced limited and often degrading options. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Bridger," she said slowly, her English feeling strange in her mouth after weeks of speaking mostly Lakota. "But I have made my decision. The adoption ceremony will proceed. This is my home now and Emma's home. We will build our future here." Thomas Bridger's eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded with what looked like respect. "That takes courage, ma'am. Not many could adapt as you apparently have. If you change your mind, I pass through this territory regularly." "The offer stands." He replaced his hat and turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. There are rumors that the army is planning a major campaign against the Lakota next spring. Reinforcements coming from back east, new commanders with aggressive strategies. You might want to be aware of what you're committing to. Life here is likely to get more dangerous before it gets better." After he left, Mary sat in troubled silence. Takawin touched her shoulder questioningly, sensing her distress. Through gestures and the Lakota words she knew, Mary tried to explain the conversation. Takawin listened, then spoke firmly, her words slow enough for Mary to understand the essence. "You are my daughter now. Army comes or not, you stay with family. We protect you, you protect us. This is the way." Her simple certainty was both comforting and sobering. Mary had chosen this path, and Takawin was making clear that it was a complete choice, not something that could be partially embraced or easily abandoned when difficulties arose. The night before the ceremony, Mary barely slept. Emma was restless too, perhaps sensing her mother's anxiety. As Mary paced the lodge, singing softly to calm her daughter, she heard voices outside. Through the hide walls, she recognized Chief Chanupahota's distinctive deep tone, speaking with someone. After a moment, Zitkala pushed aside the entrance flap. "Chief wishes to speak with you. I will watch Emma." Mary handed the baby to Zitkala and stepped outside into the cool night air. The chief stood a few paces from her lodge, his face illuminated by the light of the nearly full moon. He gestured for her to walk with him, and they moved away from the sleeping camp toward the river. For a long time he said nothing, simply walked with measured steps, his hands clasped behind his back. Mary matched his pace, her heart pounding with uncertainty about this unexpected summons. Finally, at the river's edge, he stopped and turned to face her. When he spoke, it was in careful English, each word chosen deliberately. "Tomorrow you become Lakota. No going back after ceremony. You understand this?" Mary nodded. "I understand." The chief studied her face in the moonlight. "Trader offered you escape. You refused. Why?" It was a test, Mary realized, a final assessment of her commitment. She chose her words carefully, speaking in a mixture of English and Lakota. "I have nothing in White World. Husband dead, home destroyed, no family waits for me. But here I have T'Chawin who teaches me. I have Zitkala who helps me. I have your protection. Most important, Emma has future here. She can grow up safe, learn both worlds, become strong. This is worth everything to me." The chief listened intently, then nodded slowly. "You speak truth. I see it in your eyes." He paused, seeming to struggle with the next words. "My wife, Wickapi, she was afraid too when she came to my lodge. She was from another band, and our marriage was arranged to strengthen alliance between tribes. She did not know me, did not love me, but she learned our ways together, built life together. She became strong woman, beloved by all." His voice grew thick with emotion. "When sickness took her and our daughter, I thought I would die too. For a long time I wished I had died with them." Mary's throat tightened with empathy for this powerful man's vulnerability. He continued, his gaze distant. "Seeing you with your child, seeing you fight to protect her, seeing you choose life even when everything is taken away, this reminds me why we survive. We survive for those we love, for future we build for them. You honor my wife's memory by showing same strength she showed. This is why I protect you, why I offer you place among my people. Not pity, but respect." The explanation moved Mary deeply. She had wondered about his motivations, worried they were entirely rooted in grief and projection. But this was more complex, a recognition of qualities he valued, a deliberate choice to find meaning in tragedy by preventing similar tragedy for others. "I will honor that respect," she said softly. "I will work every day to be worthy of the chance you have given Emma and me. I will learn your ways, follow your customs, become truly Lakota in heart and spirit, not just in name." Chief Chanupa Hota placed his hand on her shoulder briefly, a gesture of approval and connection. "Tomorrow you receive name. Name is important, it carries meaning, tells story. I have chosen name for you, if you will accept it." Mary's breath caught. She had known she would receive a new name, but learning the chief himself had chosen it felt profoundly significant. "I will be honored to accept whatever name you give me." The chief smiled slightly, one of his rare expressions of warmth. "You will be called Wiyaka Waste. It means good feather. The feather bends in strong wind, but does not break. It floats on water, but does not sink. You have shown this quality, this ability to bend without breaking. This will serve you well in life ahead." Mary repeated the name softly, feeling the shape of it in her mouth. Wiyaka Waste, good feather. It was beautiful, and the meaning resonated with her experience. She had bent under the weight of loss and captivity, but had not broken. She had adapted, survived, and now was being offered the chance to thrive. "I accept this name with gratitude. I will strive to live up to its meaning." They walked back to the camp together, in comfortable silence, the river murmuring beside them, the moon casting long shadows across the prairie grass. The morning of the ceremony dawned clear and bright, the sky an endless expanse of blue unmarred by clouds. The camp stirred early, everyone aware that today would be significant. T'Chawin arrived at Mary's lodge before sunrise, bringing ceremonial clothing. The dress was exquisite, far finer than anything Mary had worn since her capture. It was made of soft white doeskin, decorated with intricate beadwork, in patterns that T'Chawin explained represented protection, growth, and new beginnings. There were matching moccasins adorned with quillwork, and a shawl woven from buffalo wool that would drape across Mary's shoulders. As T'Chawin helped her dress, other women from the family began to arrive. Kimimila, Chaitan's pregnant wife brought a comb made from porcupine quills and began working through Mary's tangled blonde hair, separating it into sections for braiding. Another woman, Tachewin's sister, applied paint to Mary's face in delicate patterns that signified her transition from outsider to tribe member. The attention was overwhelming, but clearly meant as an honor. These women taking time to prepare her properly for the ceremony that would transform her identity. Emma, dressed in a tiny outfit that matched Mary's ceremonial clothing, watched the preparations with wide eyes. Several women cooed over her, remarking in Lakota about how beautiful she looked. Mary caught words she now understood: pretty baby, strong spirit, blessed child. The acceptance these women were showing Emma filled Mary with profound gratitude. Whatever challenges lay ahead, her daughter would be raised surrounded by people who valued her, who would teach her and protect her as one of their own. As midday approached, the tribe gathered in a large circle near the camp center. Chief Chanupa Hota stood at the focal point, flanked by tribal elders, including old Winona. Drums began to beat, a steady rhythm that seemed to resonate in Mary's chest. Tachewin led her into the circle, positioning her before the chief. Emma was held by Kimimela, who stood just outside the circle, ready to bring the baby forward when required. Mary's legs trembled slightly, but she forced herself to stand tall, to meet the chief's gaze with the courage he had acknowledged in her. Chief Chanupa Hota raised his hands, and the drums fell silent. He began to speak in Lakota, his voice carrying across the gathered tribe. Though Mary's language skills were still limited, she understood the essence of his words from the phrases Zitkala had taught her. He spoke of the tribe's history, of the many peoples who had joined the Lakota over generations through adoption and marriage. He spoke of strength found in adaptation, of wisdom in recognizing courage regardless of its source. He spoke of his own family, the losses that had shaped him, and the responsibility of leadership to make decisions that honored both the past and the future. Then he called Mary forward by her white name one final time. Mary Calhoun, you came to us as captive, taken in the conflicts that plague our peoples. You could have remained broken by grief and fear. Instead, you showed strength, willingness to learn, respect for our ways. You worked hard, accepted guidance, proved yourself worthy of a place among us. Now we offer you that place fully and without reservation. Do you accept adoption into the Lakota people, accepting all responsibilities and protections this brings? Mary's voice was strong as she replied in Lakota, using the phrases she had practiced. I accept with humble gratitude. I pledge to honor Lakota customs, to contribute to the tribe's welfare, to raise my daughter, to respect the ways of the people. I leave behind my old identity and embrace my new life as Lakota. The chief nodded approvingly, then continued. From this moment, you are no longer Mary Calhoun of the white world. You are Wiaka Waste, Good Feather, daughter of Tachewin, member of this tribe. Your past is forgotten, your future is with us. Do you accept this name and this new identity? Tears streamed down Mary's face as she answered. I accept. I am Wiaka Waste. The chief turned to Tachewin. Do you accept this woman as your daughter, taking responsibility for her guidance and protection? Tachewin stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. I accept her as my daughter. She is now of my family, of my blood. What threatens her threatens me. What honors her honors me. I will teach her and guide her as I would any child of my body. Chief Chanupa Hota then gestured for Kimimela to bring Emma forward. He took the baby gently, holding her up for the tribe to see. This child too becomes Lakota. She will be called Wichikala Waste, good little girl. She will be raised knowing our language, our customs, our ways. She belongs to all of us now, as all children belong to the tribe. He handed Emma to Mary, then placed his hands on both their heads in a gesture of blessing. The transformation is complete. Welcome Wiaka Waste and Wichikala Waste to the Lakota people. The drums erupted in celebration, joined by voices raised in song and ululation. Women came forward to embrace Mary, now Wiaka Waste, welcoming her formally into the tribe. Even some who had been skeptical or hostile seemed moved by the ceremony's solemnity, choosing to honor the chief's decision and the traditions it represented. The celebration continued throughout the afternoon, with feasting, dancing, and storytelling. Wiyaka Waste sat beside Tachawin, watching as her daughter was passed among the women, each one taking a turn to hold her and offer blessings. Not everyone participated in the celebration. Wiyaka Waste noticed Wakinyela standing at the edge of the gathering, her face set in lines of bitter disapproval. Several other women stood with her, their body language speaking clearly of their refusal to accept this adoption as legitimate. The sight was sobering, a reminder that ceremony and tradition could not instantly erase the deep wounds that existed between their peoples. But it was also a reminder that she now had allies, a family that had claimed her publicly and would defend that claim. As evening fell and the celebration began to wind down, Chief Chanupa Hota approached Wiyaka Waste where she sat nursing Emma, now Wichikala. He lowered himself to sit beside her, an informality that surprised her. "You did well today," he said in English. Spoke clearly, stood strong. "Tribe saw your sincerity." Wiyaka Waste smiled through her exhaustion. "I meant every word. This is my life now. I will make it a good one, for my daughter and for the people who have accepted us." The chief watched the baby nursing, that now familiar expression of mingled pain and tenderness crossing his face. "My daughter would have been close to your daughter's age if she had lived. Sometimes I wonder what she would have become, what kind of woman she would have grown into." His voice was contemplative rather than mournful. "Now I will watch your daughter grow. See her learn to walk, to speak, to become woman of the people. In this way, something of my daughter lives on. Not same, but connection remains." Wiyaka Waste understood what he was offering, a glimpse into the complex motivations behind his protection. He was not trying to replace his lost daughter with Emma, but he was finding meaning in nurturing life after being powerless to prevent death. It was a profound gift, this trust he was placing in her to raise her child well, to honor the second chance he was providing both of them. "She will know of your kindness," Wiyaka Waste promised. "When she is old enough to understand, I will tell her how Chief Chanupa Hota saw a frightened captive woman nursing her baby and chose mercy over cruelty. I will tell her that her life among the Lakota people began with an act of compassion that shocked the entire tribe, but ultimately made us all stronger." The chief nodded, satisfied with this promise. He stood to leave, then paused. "Winter comes soon. Will be hard season, first winter as Lakota. But you are strong. You will survive. And when spring returns, you will no longer be the woman you are today. You will be fully Wiyaka Waste, fully one of us, and no one will remember you were ever anything else." With that prophecy, he walked away, leaving Wiyaka Waste to contemplate the profound transformation her life had undergone, and the uncertain but no longer hopeless future that stretched before her and her daughter. Winter descended upon the plains with brutal efficiency, transforming the landscape into a vast expanse of white, punctuated by the dark forms of the Lakota lodges huddled against the wind. The tribe had moved to their winter camp in a protected valley 2 weeks after Wiyaka Waste's adoption ceremony, seeking shelter from the worst of the coming storms. The new location offered better protection from the northern winds and access to a cottonwood grove that provided firewood and browse for the horses. Life contracted during these cold months, becoming focused on the essential tasks of survival, maintaining fires, preparing food from dwindling stores, caring for animals and children, enduring the long dark nights when the temperature dropped so low that breathing hurt. Wiyaka Waste's first winter as a Lakota woman tested her in ways she had not anticipated. The physical hardships were intense, hauling water that froze in its container before reaching her lodge, gathering firewood with hands so numb she could barely grip the axe, processing frozen meat in conditions that made every task twice as difficult. But the greater challenge was psychological, learning to live with the constant proximity of others in ways that left no privacy, no space for solitary grief or doubt. The Lakota way was communal, with families visiting each other's lodges daily. Meals shared, stories told, every aspect of life witnessed and participated in by the group. For someone raised in the relative isolation of a frontier homestead, this constant togetherness was exhausting. Yet it was also this closeness that sustained her through the hardest times. When Wichikala developed a fever during a particularly vicious storm, it was the collective knowledge of the tribe's women that saved her. Winona brought herbs that reduced the fever. Takshawin stayed awake through the night, helping Wiaka Waste care for the sick infant, and Kimimela offered prayers to the spirits for the child's recovery. The baby survived what might have been a fatal illness in isolation, protected by the web of care that surrounded all children in the tribe. Wiaka Waste wept with gratitude when the fever finally broke, understanding in a visceral way that her decision to stay had quite literally saved her daughter's life. As the winter progressed, Wiaka Waste's language skills improved dramatically. Living entirely in Lakota, with no option to retreat into English, forced a fluency born of necessity. By midwinter, she was dreaming in Lakota, thinking in Lakota, even occasionally forgetting English words for things she now knew primarily by their Lakota names. This linguistic transformation marked a deeper shift in her identity. She found herself adopting Lakota perspectives on matters large and small, understanding the spiritual significance of certain practices, feeling the rhythms of tribal decision-making as natural rather than foreign. The woman named Mary Calhoun receded further each day, becoming a distant memory of someone she used to be. The political situation beyond the winter camp continued to deteriorate, though news traveled slowly in the frozen months. Thomas Bridger returned in late January, his trading party nearly lost in a blizzard before stumbling into the Lakota camp half frozen. Once recovered, he brought disturbing news from the forts. The army was indeed planning a spring campaign, with reinforcements already arriving and commanders drawing up strategies for what they called the final pacification of the Lakota territories. Treaties were being ignored, boundaries redrawn on maps in distant offices, and the pressure on tribal lands was about to intensify dramatically. Chief Chanupa Hota called an emergency council to discuss the implications. Wiaka Waste, now recognized as a full tribe member, was permitted to attend and listen, though as a woman she could not speak, unless directly addressed. She sat with the other women along the council circle's edge, Wichikala sleeping in the cradle board on her back, and listened as the men debated their options. Some warriors argued for immediate action, striking at the forts before the spring reinforcements arrived. Others counseled patience, suggesting they move deeper into the unclaimed territories to avoid confrontation. The elders spoke of the long history of broken treaties and questioned whether any accommodation with the whites was possible. Chief Chanupa Hota listened to all perspectives before speaking. His words, translated quietly by Zitkala for the few who still struggled with rapid Lakota, were measured and strategic. He acknowledged the desire for action, but pointed out their vulnerable position. The tribe had many children, elders, and pregnant women, including Kimimela, who was due to give birth within weeks. A winter or early spring campaign would endanger these vulnerable members. Better to wait, to see what spring actually brought, to prepare for multiple possibilities rather than committing to a single course before they understood the full situation. His wisdom carried the day, and the council agreed to maintain vigilance while avoiding provocation. After the council, Wiaka Waste found herself walking alongside Chief Chanupa Hota as the gathering dispersed. He slowed his pace to match hers, clearly wanting to speak privately. The trader, Bridger, he asked about you, wanted to know if you had reconsidered his offer to take you to the fort. Wiaka Waste shook her head firmly. My answer is unchanged. I'm Lakota now. My place is here, whatever comes. The chief studied her face in the dim light of the winter moon. War is coming. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. When it comes, it will be terrible. The white soldiers are many, like grass on the prairie. We are fewer each year. Do you understand what you are choosing to stay for? The question deserved honesty. I understand that the future is uncertain and dangerous. But Chief, where would be safe for me and my daughter? If I returned to white settlements, I would be a widow with no resources, dependent on charity, or forced into situations I cannot bear to contemplate. Here I have family, purpose, protection. Yes, war may come, but I would rather face it among people who value me than alone among strangers who would see me as a burden. She paused, then added softly, "And there is something else. I've learned things here about living in harmony with the land, about community, about what truly matters. I do not want my daughter raised in the world I came from, where people destroy more than they need, take more than they use, and measure worth in gold and property rather than in character and contribution. Here, she will learn better values." Chief Chanupa was silent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You have become wise, Wiyaka Waste. You see clearly what many never understand. The white world and Lakota world are not just different in customs, but different in spirit. You have chosen spirit over comfort. This is the mark of true courage." They had reached her lodge, and he paused before departing. "When spring comes and trouble begins, stay close to the women and children. Do not try to fight unless there is no other choice. Your value to the tribe is in surviving, in raising your daughter to carry forward what we teach her. This is how we win, even when we lose battles. We win by ensuring the next generation remembers who we are and what we stood for." The words stayed with Wiyaka Waste through the remaining weeks of winter. She threw herself into learning everything she could about Lakota culture, history, and practical skills. Tachawin proved an inexhaustible teacher, showing her how to make pemmican that would last for months, how to tan hides until they were soft as cloth, how to identify medicinal plants even when covered in snow, how to read weather signs in the sky and animal behavior. Wiyaka Waste absorbed it all, driven by the understanding that this knowledge was precious, that it represented generations of accumulated wisdom that was under threat from the encroaching white civilization. She also spent time with Winona, the ancient woman who had once been Crow and who understood better than anyone the process of transformation Wiyaka Waste was undergoing. The old woman shared stories of her own capture and eventual integration, speaking frankly about the loneliness of the early years, the moments of doubt and grief, but also the eventual peace that came from full acceptance of her new identity. "You grieve for the life that was taken from you," Winona said during one of their conversations. "This is natural and right, but do not grieve forever. There comes a time when you must choose to fully live in the present rather than haunting the past like a ghost. That time is different for each person, but you will know it when it arrives." For Wiyaka Waste, that moment came during the first real thaw of early spring. She was standing by the river, watching the ice break apart and flow downstream, when she realized she had gone an entire day without thinking about Daniel or their old homestead. The realization brought a pang of guilt, as if forgetting were a betrayal. But then she looked down at Wichikala, now 10 months old, and beginning to say her first words, all of them in Lakota. Her daughter would never remember the homestead, would never know her father, would grow up entirely as a child of the Lakota people. And that was not tragedy, it was simply reality, the path their lives had taken. Wiyaka Waste could honor Daniel's memory while still embracing her present circumstances. The two were not mutually exclusive. Spring brought not only thawing rivers, but also the troubles Chief Chanupa had predicted. Scouts reported increased cavalry patrols in the territories, new forts being constructed, and surveying parties marking out land for white settlement in areas guaranteed to the Lakota by treaty. The tribe held multiple councils to discuss their response, and tensions within the camp rose as the warrior societies prepared for likely conflict. Wiyaka Waste watched these preparations with growing dread. understanding that the relative peace of winter was ending and that the violence she had hoped to leave behind was returning. The crisis came in late April, when a hunting party was attacked by cavalry soldiers who claimed the Lakota were on land designated for white settlement. 3 warriors were killed, and 2 others were seriously wounded. The survivors limped back to camp with their dead, and the tribe erupted in grief and rage. Wakinyela, who had lost her husband and sons to similar attacks, led the calls for immediate retaliation. Her voice carried weight now, as more and more tribe members saw in the latest killings proof that accommodation with whites was impossible, that only strength and resistance would preserve their way of life. Chief Chanupahota faced the most difficult decision of his leadership. Half his warriors demanded he authorize raids against the settlements and forts. The other half, including many elders, counseled retreat to more remote territories to avoid further conflict. The tribe was fracturing along these fault lines, and his choice would determine not just immediate tactics, but the long-term survival of his people. Wiyaka Waste watched him during this period and saw the weight of leadership aging him visibly. His face grew more lined, his shoulders more bowed, as he carried the burden of knowing that whatever he decided, people would die as a consequence. The chief called Wiyaka Waste to his lodge one evening during this tense period. She came nervously, wondering if her white origins were about to become a liability as war fever gripped the camp. But his demeanor was calm, almost reflective. "I wanted to speak with you because you understand both worlds," he said. "Tell me honestly, is there any path to peace? Can our peoples find a way to share these lands, or must one destroy the other?" The question was almost heartbreaking in its hopefulness, the desperate wish of a leader trying to find an alternative to inevitable conflict. Wiyaka Waste considered her answer carefully, knowing he deserved truth rather than comforting lies. "Chief, I believe there are individuals on both sides who desire peace and could find ways to coexist. But the force driving white expansion is not controlled by individuals. It is driven by hunger for land, for gold, for resources that seems to have no limit. The whites I knew believed their way of life was superior, that they had a right, even a duty, to take these lands and reshape them. They do not see the Lakota as equals, with whom to negotiate, but as obstacles to be removed. I wish I could tell you otherwise, but this is the truth as I understand it." The chief absorbed this with visible pain. "Then we fight, knowing we will likely lose. We fight so that future generations remember we did not surrender our dignity, our way of life, without resistance. We fight so our children's children will know we were not cowards." Wiyaka Waste felt tears on her cheeks. "And I will stay, whatever comes. I will help care for the wounded, protect the children, do whatever is needed. My daughter is Lakota. If the Lakota must fight for their survival, then she fights too, even if right now her fighting is simply surviving to carry forward what you teach her." Sassin, Chief Chanupahota, placed his hand over hers, a gesture of profound respect and affection. "You have become the bridge I hoped you would be, not a bridge that prevents conflict that was always impossible, but a bridge that shows us that individuals can transcend the hatred between peoples, that courage and compassion exist in all humans regardless of which world they come from. When I saw you nursing your baby that first day, I could have chosen cruelty. The easier choice would have been cruelty, for you represented everything that threatens my people. But I chose mercy, and that choice brought you here, brought your daughter here, and enriched our tribe in ways I could not have predicted. Whatever happens in the days ahead, I do not regret that choice. You have honored my wife's memory and my daughter's memory by showing the same strength they showed. For this, you have my eternal gratitude." The next morning, Chief Chanupahota announced his decision to the assembled tribe. They would not initiate raids against the settlements, but they would defend their territory with full force when threatened. Hunting parties would go out armed and prepared for conflict. Women and children would stay closer to camp under guard, and they would send messengers to other Lakota bands, to the Cheyenne and Arapaho, building alliances for the larger conflict everyone now understood was inevitable. It was a middle path that satisfied no one completely, but maintained his authority and kept the tribe together. In the weeks that followed, the camp took on the character of a fortress. Young men trained intensively in weapons and tactics. Women prepared supplies that could be rapidly packed for flight if necessary. Scouts maintained constant surveillance of the surrounding territories, reporting cavalry movements and settler encroachments. Wiyaka Waste worked alongside the other women, making extra moccasins, drying meat, preparing medical supplies from herbs and plants. Wichikala, now walking and babbling constantly, was kept close, with multiple women always watching the children. One evening in early summer, as the sun painted the sky in spectacular oranges and purples, Wiyaka Waste sat outside her lodge with Tachawin and Zitkala, watching the children play under careful supervision. Wichikala toddled among them, her blonde hair marking her as different, but her Lakota clothing and language marking her as one of them. A visiting elder from another band stopped to watch the children and asked Tachawin about the fair-haired child. Tachawin responded with evident pride, "That is my granddaughter, Wichikala Waste. Her mother is Wiyaka Waste, who came to us from the white world but chose to become Lakota. She has proven herself a valuable member of our tribe." The visiting elder nodded approvingly. "I've heard this story. It is said that your chief showed great wisdom and compassion in adopting her. In these dark times, such stories remind us that not all whites are our enemies, that there are individuals of courage and good heart in every people. This gives me hope that somehow, someday, our grandchildren might find peace." The women sat in contemplative silence, holding that fragile hope even as they prepared for war. As the season progressed, skirmishes between Lakota warriors and cavalry patrols became more frequent. Each encounter brought casualties, grief, and hardened hearts on both sides. Wiyaka Waste treated wounded warriors as they returned to camp, using skills Winona had taught her to clean and bind wounds, to prepare poultices that fought infection, to offer comfort to men facing death. Some warriors were initially reluctant to be treated by a woman who'd been white, but her gentle competence and complete dedication gradually won them over. By midsummer, she was recognized as one of the most skilled healers in the camp. One particularly difficult night, a young warrior named Matto was brought in with a terrible wound to his chest. Wiyaka Waste worked for hours trying to save him, but the injury was too severe. As he lay dying, he grasped her hand and thanked her in slurred Lakota for her efforts. "You are truly one of us," he whispered. "May your daughter grow strong and remember our ways." He died moments later, and Wiyaka Waste wept for him, as she would have wept for any member of her family. Chief Chanupahota found her after she had cleaned Matto's body for burial, her hands still shaking from the experience of watching another young person die senselessly. He sat beside her without speaking, his presence a comfort. Finally, he said quietly, "This is what we face. More will die before this conflict ends, but we face it together as a people. You have proven yourself 1,000 times over, Wiyaka Waste. No one in this tribe questions your loyalty or your value anymore. Even Wakinyela has softened toward you after watching you care for the wounded warriors. You have done what I hoped. You have shown that transformation is possible, that people from different worlds can find common ground and common purpose." As summer peaked and the long days stretched toward autumn, life in the camp continued its rhythms despite the ongoing conflict. Kimimela gave birth to a healthy son, an event that brought joy to the entire tribe. Wichikala took her first independent steps, delighting everyone who witnessed them. The buffalo hunt was successful, bringing meat and hides that would sustain them through another winter. Gardens planted near the river produced squash, corn, and beans. Life asserted itself stubbornly against the backdrop of violence and uncertainty. On a golden afternoon in late August, Wiyaka Waste stood on a hill overlooking the camp, Wichikala playing at her feet. From this vantage point, she could see the entire sweep of the Lakota settlement, smoke rising from lodge fires, horses grazing on the hillside, the river glinting in the sun, people moving about their daily tasks. It was beautiful and peaceful, a sight that filled her heart with complex emotions. This was her home now, truly and completely. The woman she had been, Mary Calhoun of the Wyoming homesteads, was gone. In her place stood Wiyaka Waste, Lakota woman, healer, mother, daughter of Takawin, protected by Chief Chanupahota, member of a tribe fighting for its survival. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The terror of capture, the grief of loss, the slow, painful process of adaptation, and the unexpected discovery of belonging in the most unlikely place. She thought about Chief Chanupahota's mercy, that single decision to show compassion rather than cruelty, and how it had created ripples that extended far beyond that initial moment. His choice had saved her life and her daughter's life. It had enriched the tribe with her skills and dedication. It had demonstrated that even in times of conflict, there was room for humanity, for seeing individuals rather than only enemies. As the sun began to set, painting the world in amber light, Wiyaka Waste picked up Wichikala and headed back to camp. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own sorrows and joys. But tonight, she would sit with her adopted family, share a meal, tell stories, and be grateful for this life she had built from the ashes of the old. The future remained uncertain. The conflict between their peoples would likely worsen before any hope of resolution emerged. But she faced that future with the strength that had earned her name. Good feather, bending but not breaking, adapting but not losing her essential self. In his lodge at the camp's heart, Chief Chanupahota sat in contemplation. His thoughts on the strange paths life took and the unexpected consequences of choosing mercy over vengeance. He had extended protection to a frightened captive woman and her infant, acting on impulse, driven by his own grief and loss. That choice had brought Wiyaka Waste into their lives, had added her strength and compassion to the tribe, had proven that transformation and belonging were possible even across the deepest divides. As he prepared for the trials he knew were coming, he found comfort in that truth, that even in the darkest times, acts of humanity mattered, that kindness was never wasted even when it could not prevent larger tragedies. The story of how Chief Chanupahota found a captive woman nursing an infant and chose to protect rather than punish her had become legend among the Lakota bands. It was told around fires, passed from elder to child, remembered as an example of wisdom and compassion. And at its center was Wiyaka Waste herself, living proof that people could bridge worlds, could find common ground, could choose to belong in places they never expected to call home. Her journey from terrified captive to valued tribe member, from Mary Calhoun to Wiyaka Waste, was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the transformative power of mercy. Whatever the future held for the Lakota people and the daughter she raised among them, that story would endure, a reminder that even in humanity's darkest chapters, light could be found in unexpected places, kindled by unexpected hands, and carried forward by those brave enough to embrace transformation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.